It's got to be real.
Be real. Be real. Yes, guys, what's up? So, Gennady Triple G Golovkin and David Lemieux. Now, I haven't done a video on this fight yet. It's because it's such a big fight. I've been really looking into it. I've really been thinking about what I wanted to talk about in this video that other people haven't really covered. It's no point in me doing a video that everybody's, where I'm talking about stuff that everybody has already talked about. So, Triple G Gennady Golovkin, David Lemieux, they've both got very high knockout percentages, extremely high knockout percentages. Both are ranked as two of the best punchers in boxing at the moment. Gennady Golovkin is often ranked as the #1 hardest hitting puncher in boxing pound for pound at the moment. But you see, something that happens in boxing very frequently and quite often, and everybody's just assuming, for every expert is assuming it, every boxing channel is assuming it, every boxing fan is assuming it, that this fight is going to end in a knockout. I'm here to predict, and I'm going to say that I don't think this fight is going to end in a knockout. It could do, but it's not so much that it will end in a knockout or not. It's more this, what I'm trying to say, that when we look back at Lucas Matisse versus Ruslan Provodnikov, and when we look back at another fight, which is Lucas Matisse versus Danny Garcia, let's just assess these two fights. Lucas Matisse is also one of the hardest hitting punchers in boxing at the moment. Often what happens in boxing is a fighter who has a high knockout ratio and another fighter who has a very high knockout ratio. They say these two are going to fight, and because they've got very high knockout ratios, they're going to knock each other out, and one of them is definitely going to go out. One of the things that people don't take into consideration is, one, the chins, and two, that when there's such a hype made about a fight that's going to have such a, where both fighters got such a high knockout ratio, and it's expected that there's going to be a knockout. When that's the case, often what happens is one of the fighters will choose to box. Because when you have two fighters going into brawl, you're going to end up with a real brawl, right? But sometimes what tends to happen, and we saw this in the Lucas Matisse fight with Danny Garcia, we saw this in the Lucas Matisse fight with Ruslan Provodnikov, and it's happened in the past as well, where more often than not, when two brawlers get together, one of the brawlers turns into a boxer. Because they want to win. They want to win, right? One of them will want to win more than the other one. The one that wants to win more will be willing to change their game plan. Whereas the person who's coming in for glory, that person is just going to come in not thinking so much, and he's going to come in to brawl. And the person who boxes, Lucas Matisse versus Ruslan Provodnikov, is the perfect example. Now, I think Ruslan Provodnikov would have won that fight with Lucas Matisse, and I stick to that, because had Lucas Matisse not boxed and had Lucas Matisse come in to brawl. However, Lucas Matisse was very smart on this occasion, and he didn't come in his usual brawling self. He boxed, and we've never seen him jab that much in a fight. And he won the fight because he's a hard puncher. He can bang, but he boxed that day. Ruslan Provodnikov has, in my opinion, a better chin than Matisse. He could take more punishment, but he bruises up. And I think Matisse is probably the bigger hitter, but Ruslan Provodnikov, he's also a massive hitter. He's like a truck. When he hits you, he's got a lot of force behind his punches. He's a very heavy guy. He's very difficult to push back. Had Lucas Matisse jumped into a fight like that, I think he would have struggled very significantly in that fight, but he didn't. He did Ruslan Provodnikov. Provodnikov put up a good fight, but Lucas Matisse did him. Now, Lucas Matisse, Danny Garcia, Lucas Matisse went into that fight, and this fight was before the Provodnikov fight. Lucas Matisse went into that fight thinking to himself, I'm just going to go and brawl, and it's going to be a big banging fight. And everyone thought Danny Garcia, Matisse, it's going to be a big, and it didn't turn out like that. It had a very tentative opening. And I'm going to tell you where I realised this first. It wasn't actually watching boxing on TV. I remember when I was watching an amateur fight live, locally. It was a very local fight in my own city, and from what I'd heard about the two fighters was that these two fighters are really good fighters, top notch, and we were expecting a really good fight. And for the first round, they didn't throw a punch. They were just feeling, and because they're amateurs, right? It sometimes happens where they can't even throw a jab, and they were just feeling each other out. And there was maybe about 2 or 3 punches thrown in the whole round. The referee had to tell them off and tell them, look, you have to fight. It's a boxing match. And because they were so experienced and had so much respect for each other, both of them didn't throw a punch for the first round, basically. You had a totally dead round, and it was what? And this tends to happen sometimes, in my opinion, in boxing, where the fights that are expected to be such a devastating fight where someone's gonna get knocked out. It just doesn't turn out like that a lot of the time. It's happened time and time again where one fighter will choose to box and the other will choose to box, you know, and they'll be wary of each other's power. Sometimes it could happen where they both decide, right, forget this, I'm gonna come out, I'm gonna brawl, and they both decide, and they both then end up having a massive tear up, and you see that in boxing as well. Obviously, right? You have them big glory fights where, you know, it's just blood and guts. In my opinion, I think in this fight, I think Gennady Golovkin could potentially come out and box. I don't think David Lemieux is going to come to box, okay? I think that scenario is unrealistic. I think David Lemieux understands that he doesn't have a chance of boxing Gennady Golovkin, because if he boxes, right, and he chooses to stay on the back foot, that's Gennady Golovkin's. A lot of people have tried that with Golovkin and it just doesn't seem to work, and they end up getting their asses kicked. So I think David Lemieux is going to use his power, and he's not going to expect Gennady Golovkin to come into box, and he's going to go in brawling, right? And he's going to try and go for a knockout and test Gennady Golovkin's chin. Golovkin has been tagged before, has been wobbled, I don't really know, but he's been tagged. He's been tagged hard. But yeah, he knocked the other person out when he did get tagged. But yeah, Golovkin isn't that much of a difficult target to hit. I'm expecting this. I'm expecting one out of two scenarios. Either Golovkin comes, and Golovkin comes to box, or Golovkin comes to brawl, okay? If he comes to box, he wins a fight, because I think if Golovkin boxes, he's got a tremendous amateur pedigree, he will outbox Lemieux. Lemieux will come in, trying to go for a knockout, trying really hard, and Golovkin's got power, you see. And if he boxes on the back foot and catches Lemieux being a little bit reckless, you know, letting the hype get to him, letting the adrenaline pump get to him, that he's fighting Triple G Gennady Golovkin, the expectations of a huge mega showdown, the expectations of this huge clash between two knockout artists, and he comes in like that, I think Gennady Golovkin will catch him coming in and eventually he'll knock him out. I think, and if he comes into brawl, Triple G, and David Lemieux comes into brawl, and it does happen like that, then I still think Gennady Golovkin beats him, because I just think that little bit of boxing skill that Gennady Golovkin's, it's not even a little bit, it's a lot of boxing skill that he's got, but that boxing skill that he's got, even if he chooses to brawl, he will be tactical in the way he brawls, and he will be wary of where he's putting his head, because he wants to win. He wants to win, okay? And I know that he likes these, he says, I like these Mexican-style tear-ups, but I really feel like this fight is going to be a fight where you're going to see Gennady Golovkin really use his mental aspect, and I think David Lemieux is going to be the guy who's going to come into brawl, but we could see a tentative opening in the opening 1 or 2 rounds. Eventually, it will warm. It could go a lot of different ways, to be honest, it could, but I only see it's going one way at the moment, to be honest with you. I only see Gennady Golovkin winning this fight. I will do another video on it, hopefully. But at this moment in time, I'm picking Gennady Golovkin. He's unbeaten. Lemieux has been beaten before, and Gennady Golovkin has faced the best competition that he can face in his division. And his amateur pedigree says, it just speaks volumes. He's been in there with Cotto, with Canelo in the ring and sparring, I believe. So, you know, there's a lot behind Golovkin, more than what meets the eye. He's got a lot of... Technically speaking, I mean, the only downside to Golovkin is his resume, but, I mean, that's not his fault necessarily. I mean, maybe some of it is, but for the most part, it's not his fault. So I'm expecting Golovkin to win. Skills-wise, he's flawless. I think he's a tremendous fighter. He gets hit a bit, but let's see if David Lemieux can catch that chin. But in my opinion, Golovkin wins this fight one way or another. Comment section below, subscribe as always. In a bit, guys.